Okay, my overtime garage followers. We're back in the garage working on a 2011 CX9. And this time we're in here for a water pump going bad. I was leaking coolant into the oil because for some great reason they put the water pump inside the timing cover. So on this side is the timing cover for the front of the engine, passenger side. Those are the two valve covers. It's a 3.7 liter V6. And I guess I couldn't find room outside of the timing cover, so it's inside. When it goes bad, it starts leaking in the oil. This has 170,000 miles on it, or 180, something like that. So it's due for a water pump. While we're in there, and before I get too far into tearing this down, wanted to show you what I was up to. So here's our water pump, and there's a part number. There's many. And while we're in there, we're gonna update the timing components, so the chain, gears, guides, tensioners, and all that. So if you're gonna take this down that far, the motor apart that much, you're gonna wanna replace that stuff. It's not good to let that stuff go too long either. So in addition to the timing set, this is the phase cam gears basically. So we're gonna replace those two, and we needed this tool to hold the camshafts in position while they do it, while I take all that timing equipment off of there. Otherwise they'll spin out of time. So you want to keep those all together, timed together. So all I've done so far is really just take off the upper components, the intake, air intake box there, the cover off the top of this. I've drained the nasty oil, which was like the consistency of pancake batter. Had a bunch of coolant mixed with it. I also drained the coolant. And then to get at the side of this thing, take the wheel off, I can you can see the crankshaft pulley right there. We're gonna have to get at that. So I'm just getting ready. Okay, anything else? I think that's it. Okay, back to it. Here's a little update. I've gotten a little farther, taken the intake off, and the wiring is all separated where it needs to be, so the valve covers can come off. Plug those intake and exhaust, those intake holes there for the motor. And yeah, so here are some of the parts that came off. There's a couple more. And there's the coils and such. Where's the, oh yeah, that's a motor mount. So that one just came out from here. And I needed to do that so I could lower the motor down and get access to this pulley, because it was sitting up a little too high. I was hitting this just as a metal inner fender. So drop that down a little bit. I've got two jacks, one holding the vehicle up and one holding the motor up with a block of wood. And I happen to have this small 3-jaw puller because the area that's back in here is kind of tight and skinny, so there's not really a puller made for this. especially, but this one had small enough hooks on it to reach in there and spin around and get a good bite on that. And then I used the original bolt from the pulley minus the thick washer, so that the head of the bolt will slip through the middle, and then there's a socket in there that fits it. It gives me the right distance, and then I'm spinning that out now. So it pulls right off. It's not keyed because I don't think it matters, but I did mark it just in case, but I don't think it cares. It's the timing's all done inside, and there's a gear inside that does matter, but out here the pulley doesn't care. I took that belt off, and that's the belt for the accessories. The one for power steering is a stretch style, so you just cut those off, and then when you put them back on, you stretch them on, kind of like a stretchy bike chain. So there's a number. This is a number you're gonna want. But those will just be a wear item you can find at any parts store. Okay, we're back. Made a little bit more progress here by getting the front cover off, and you can see all the timing components exposed, as well as the water pump. It is a total mess in here. Obviously this was run with, I don't know how much coolant got into the oil, but enough to make this really sludgy. So as I was cranking these the crank pulley around, I had a bunch of oil going everywhere, so made a mess. But I did that. I rotated the crank around a number of times, so many times I was getting tired of it, but you can see on the top here, let's see if I can set this down. Okay, there's the orange colored link right above the timing mark, and on this side same story, and then down below, I'll show you that one, we've got, oh, you can't see it, there it is. So that's actually a different colored link. Oh, you can see it better now. That is lined up with that timing mark right there. So that took long enough. I was cranking on it with this setup here, just a long breaker bar so I could put some leverage to it. But that was taking long enough that I actually, because I never disconnected the battery, I went ahead and just cranked with the key. So obviously nothing's hooked up here, so it was basically just rotating the engine, and that was a heck of a lot easier than cranking with this ratchet or breaker bar. Finally did get, I think I did a full revolution with the chain maybe 5, 6, 7 times, so I got unlucky about where it stopped. But now the next thing to do is to take off the tensioner. Which is right down here. So there's the tensioner against the guide. We can take that off. Then we can take off the chain. And we can take off the those cam sprockets. You can get at the rest of the timing components up top here. And the water pump, of course, which is the main reason we're in here. The other guides. There's a left side guide, right side guide. There's some up just above the water pump. So all those parts that I showed you we're replacing. And notice the tools that I installed there. Once all the timing lined up, then those are able to be set in place. And right now they're just kind of loose and free, but they'll keep those cam shafts from rotating. Okay, I'm in the middle of this, but I'll have you peek in and see where we've gotten to. Part of the timing components are back on in place. We got the cam gears here. Still have the pin and the tensioner there until I get those tightened down. I'm ready to pull that and put tension on that little chain. And you can see the water pump is in place and the new gear for the timing chain and the guide over here. And what's missing, you can see, is the gears on this side and another guide. Actually, two more small guides here. So just want to show you the interim state of affairs, and I kind of cleaned up some of the oil sludge. Here's a look on the bottom side. And then just to confirm what's going on with this motor, I'll show you the water pump that I took out. And this thing is super jammed up. As I try and turn that, the bearings are just chewed up, and so they're grinding. So that's confirmation that this water pump was bad. It was real bad. So also do a compression check on the motor to make sure that we don't have a head gasket problem, but I'm pretty confident that it's good, and I should have done it before I tore this whole engine down just so that I'd know. But I'm at the point where I'll put all the timing components back on, and then I'll do a compression check before it's all back together. So, okay, let me catch you up to where we're at. I've got timing set all installed. I lined up all the appropriate golden links and timing marks on the pulleys. So this top left one, top right one. Now that looked backwards because I'm facing the engine, but if you turn around and do it as the engine sees it, this would be left and that one is right. And then down below on the crank pulley. So got everything torqued well, and then once I got all the tensioners and everything tightened, then I pulled the pins, and you can see that they've been pulled already. The red push pin like pins I've pulled out, that put tension on the chain everywhere. So that allowed me to go ahead and crank it over to do a compression test, which is what I did next. Before I talk about that, I want to talk about this little piece here. That's a guide that is different than the stock one, and it's because it's an updated version. And as you can see, that one's carrying the chain on the right hand side of it, but the stock one did the opposite. So this guy and it was bolted in this direction in the same two spots that this is bolted in, and it's kind of hard to see. The top bolt there is behind that sprocket, and the second one is there sticking out. I actually had to find a longer version of that bolt because the stock one was too short. It had two of these, and that was fine for this bracket because it was the same thickness for both of them. But the new revised updated part had a real thick spacer here, thick piece of it, and then the other part you could use the stock bolt for, and that's what I did. So a little education on those parts. To me it looked like the wrong part, like I had the wrong kit or something. So got some help from another YouTube video where it was showing that difference, and sure enough mine had the same situation as that one. I can link you guys up to the other video, which is a little bit better how-to video than this one here, but I'm showing you another version of it, so you can look at both before you go ahead and do this job. Now I'll talk just a little bit about the compression test, which, like I said earlier, I should have done before I went ahead and dove into the water pump and timing chain set, because I would have had to take all the timing stuff off if I found the head gaskets were bad. But as I was saying earlier, I know the water pump was a culprit, and this was just a double check to make sure I didn't also have blown head gaskets. So I took a spark plug out one at a time, and I threaded this in its place, and then hooked my compression checker up to it and cranked it over. And I held it for like 5 compression cycles because you can kind of see the needle jumping, and then it kind of tapers off and tops out, in this case about 120 psi. So I couldn't find an exact number out there for the specification because I didn't want to dig through the shop manual and try and find it, and so I just ran it, and I found 120 psi on each of those, and it varied within about 5 psi up or down. So that's a good sign. That means my cylinder compression is consistent across all 6 cylinders. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is prep the engine block surface, the mating surface, to the timing chain cover. I'm going to slap that on and then dump a bunch of oil, maybe some cleaner. I'm going to try and use this seafoam motor treatment, and that should help clear out some of the sludge that was built by mixing the coolant together so well with the oil. So that's what's next. I will put this all together and get it running and let you know how it goes at the end. Okay, we're getting on with buttoning this up, and you can see the timing cover made it in place, the valve covers in place, new gaskets on those. I also replaced the thermostat right in side of here, so a bolt up on the top and the bottom is all there, and since the coolant was drained already, that was simple. And that part is looking like that, so just inside there like that. There was a rubber gasket around that surface. So okay, and then I made sure the power steering pump was in place before I got too far to make sure I could get that in. Got the motor mount in place and then put the crank pulley on. And now if you see how I got it set up now, the power steering pump belt is a stretch belt because there's no tensioner or adjuster. So here's a trick that you can do. Put zip ties through the holes on that pulley to hang on to it, and notice it's the bottom two holes, because when next thing I'll do is turn this crank pulley and it'll pull that on, and it'll hold that bottom part in place so that it can wrap around the top. So I'm going to do that now and we'll show you how that works. Okay, so I just cranked that around with a breaker bar on that bolt. Did it real slow. And so here's the first, I can't really point at it. The first zip tie there is wrapped around to that spot clockwise. And then the second one is up above that. Hard to see. Yeah, that just pulled it right on, and I'm going to clip those to get rid of them. Okay, now mission accomplished on that power steering pulley belt. I didn't believe it the first time I did it that it would do that, but this belt is stretchy enough, and as long as you can hang on to it well enough, it wraps around there, stretches enough to drop in place. Alright. Okay, we're gonna fire this guy up and see how it sounds after putting it back together. So I got it all reassembled, filled with coolant and oil. I put the intake on and the air intake. I left the cover off still so I can take a look in here and see if there's any leaks or if I missed any electrical connections. But looking pretty good so far. And it's looking pretty good from the back here, not seeing any signs of leaking coolant and getting into the cylinders and burning. If there's any smoke there, it's just from the cool weather. And so yeah, it seems to be running smooth. I think we've got a problem solved, and the engine itself sounds like, you know, a smooth running sewing machine. Smooth.